This is the Policy Digest, a Center for Policy Analysis podcast that explores how African societies are governed and how people and their leaders are shaping the future of their communities. Through candid conversations and insightful analysis, we aim to provide a deeper understanding of the political, economic, and social landscape of Africa. So sit back, relax, and get ready to explore the diverse and dynamic world of African governance.
Most welcome to the Policy Digest. I must say we have loved having you here. I hope you enjoy the content we've been putting out there on all our podcasting platforms. You're most welcome. In this series, we're going to start a series to reflect on Uganda's independence, to reflect on our past, to reminisce the present, and recreate the future. Imagine what it could be. And in this specific episode, we shall be looking at the contribution of the Uganda People's Congress to Uganda's civilization after independence. My hope is that after this episode, you'll know the story behind the story. You know, sometimes we are told of so many stories about UPC and our political education, but it's good to get people who were firsthand in those regimes, in those times, and they tell us the stories we could miss, the kind you don't find in books, or the context that is necessary for us to appreciate where we come from. In order to do that, we're joined by Mr. Joseph Ochieno, who is a UPC presidential candidate, and I must say UPC diehard. Mr. Joseph, you are most welcome to this podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. You've got a fantastic studio, fantastic team, and although a little difficult to find where you're located, it's very quiet, studious, and I think anybody associated with you must have the serenity to read, learn, interrogate Uganda's history, and hopefully with confidence build a foundation on which UPC did and ensure that this country is better than what it is at the moment, because that's exactly what our founding parents did.
Oh, thank you. And I wanted to just start at that very note. So from 1987 upwards, you left the country after President Museveni gained power in 1986. Could you walk us through what could have triggered you to leave the country?
Yes, I still don't know why I was arrested. Since Museveni, now 37 years later, he's still in charge. And I was arrested 18 months after he had taken power. So he was very, very much settled, so absolutely in charge. He could not say that some funny advisors of his who were in charge of situations, including, in any case, seeking to go and arrest an average young student from Makerere University. So he must know, so I really hope he's able to tell me. And I really hope he's able to tell me that before he retires. And I really hope
you were arrested by his army just
yes.
in that year when they had come to power?
Yes. No. They came to power in 1986, but I was arrested on November 2nd, 1987. I am asking for that because within the context of this conversation, I had joined Makerere in September 1985. Extremely unlucky that I joined the university under a dictatorship, but delighted that I did my A-level exams under democracy. I am very saddened that I attended my primary education under dictatorship. But I can tell you that all those experiences I had feel excessively privileged compared to what an average young Ugandan kid from Chinoni, from Mbirizi, from Moyo, perhaps from even the outskirts of Rukunjiri, but certainly not from Nagongera today, would live the life that I went through. Because although it was a modest life, born of a primary school, grade 1 teacher who then later on becomes a mini catechist and retires to work on public roads, I was able to start primary living in the year after Min had taken over power. But when I started primary school, on day one, I became a class prefect. But on that day one, we had everything in Agongar Primary School. We had absolutely everything that an average primary school one child would have. I sat on a normal desk. I sat in a cemented classroom. I sat where there's chalks and crayons and boards for young primary 1 kids to play around with and to learn to count and to write and to
That
draw.
is
1972, 71, 72. They were there. Granted, Amin had just come over, but this is the foundation of our independence, and I'll give you the context. Since you started me from 86 and with my life. So I'll bring in the import of our independence. And I started by being lined up, with 5 other pupils under mango tree. Of course, primary kids want to bring them outside the class. But there was a classroom to be elected. I was elected overwhelmingly, and it was quite embarrassing, actually, if I can remember that, because of the 5 of us, 1 person, I think, did not get anybody lining behind him. Another person, I think, got 2. One other person possibly got 4, 5.
Okay.
The next other person, I think, got 7, but all of them are members of his family. That is of whom I remember very well. His family is from near the primary school. So, and the rest of the class lined up behind me. And if I can remember, I was sort of, interestingly, the smallest, may not necessarily been the youngest, but the smallest in class. So it was a fantastic stuff. But then that day meant for me that not only was I starting school, but I was beginning the appreciation of democracy. And perhaps the privilege around it, since I was now the number 1 star citizen on that. But fast forward, I remember from then on I also became the number 1 throughout, including jumping classes, and also therefore including my primary living exams, and also beating the majority of the people in the whole of Greater Bukedi, and going to Miri later. But why I'm saying that is, go to primary 2. Primary 1, as a class monitor, I was responsible for collecting those crayons and those boards. So basically, the classroom manager. And I can tell you and can confirm, this is a republic founded at independence for God and my country. So we don't tell lies. So clearly, everything was there. In primary 2, we now have cupboards with lockers. And so I'm the one who opens and locks, not the teacher. We started having exercise books, because then now you could use books.
Was that funded by the state, or was it funded by parents? How was the education system then?
It's interesting. You rush to ask that question when I'm giving the background, because I know you genuinely don't know. And I know the majority of your audience may not know, particularly Ugandan audience.
Oh, yes.
And that, it emphasizes the reason why I have to start with it.
That's true. Very important
and
context,
so,
yeah.
Once you've completed a book, whether it's writing or drawing or mathematics, you bring the book to me. I check it to make sure that it's completely used it well.
The class
monitor. This is now primary 2. I was a prefect throughout. And I go to the cupboard, get a new exercise book. Together with the one, I take it to the class teacher, who basically just writes the other name, because as well as that time I couldn't write. And in any case, the teacher's wrong. So I did that. To the textbook, starting primary 2, every pupil had a book. So we had enough books in primary, started from primary 2 where I needed books. Every book enough for a child. In primary 1, we had counting sticks. And these are much organized counting sticks, not from the forest of Namamve, broken, for firewood, but normal organized counting sticks that I'm sure the children in Japan would use today. We had it in this country, and we had it in my classroom in Agongera. So we did that. So fast forward, I can confirm that that is the quality of education that I went in throughout my primary school. So I jumped from P3 to P5. My mother was hesitant, but I think I'll leave some of this for my memoirs. My mother was hesitant. My headmaster said, no,
he's far beyond.
He's fine.
P3,
and yes, in any case, we will deal. And there was no need, because I went to P5 and became second the first term, and the second term I came fifth. My sister taunted me, my elder sister, late married. And then my mom told her off, but in the final term I was the best in class. So I moved on. I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about my experience, but also linking my experience to the possibilities that decent education can have, meaning environment.
Has happened before.
I credit this to my family. I credit this to my faith. I credit this to my decency. But I credit this fundamentally to the environment that it was, the school, the teachers, the facilities, the head teacher, and the community. You asked me how. These were public schools, fully publicly funded. Whereas primary and secondary education, meaning all-level education, was the only education which was not free in this country. I repeat, the only education that was not free in this country
was secondary education.
Primary and all-level education. The rest of education, until NRA came to power,
was publicly funded.
Fully publicly funded.
In short, we had a Finland in the 1970s, and
that's correct, and better. Yeah, certainly, and I'll come to that. But number two, whereas the education was not free, it was highly subsidized. Meaning, first, what the parents pay for school fees in primary was more subsidized, and your researchers can go and check, per dollar, more subsidized than the amount of money per child that this NRA regime today pays in the name of universal primary education.
The capitation grant, 5,000 per child.
That is actually criminal. So that's £1, so meaning $1.3 or something
really,
like that.
About that.
So it was highly subsidized, but not free. Secondary education was highly subsidized, but not free. I am lucky I had it free, because on the basis of my performance, I got a scholarship from local government, which is still government, So I did not pay school fees in Mwiri. But you then go ahead and pay for these Parents and Teachers Association. Those are always there. There is not what they call the building funds, and normally those schools will do that because you parents are making contributions to maintenance, refurbishing. That was there. Beyond that, whenever you had your parents or grandparents talk about school fees in the 70s and the 80s and 60s, that is the context. Meaning primary education and lower secondary education, parents paid fees, but in that context. So in relative terms, the state catered for everything else. Let me reemphasize, therefore, that the crayons, the chalks, the wardrobes, the seating, the cupboards, and everything else was fully publicly paid. Are they there in most average primary schools today? No.
No.
The teachers from Mr. Vincent Law, my first teacher, and Lucy Hagege, my favorite primary school teacher, fantastic. Lucy Hagege came all the way from Busia, where the other day NRA was having fun, And the year I started primary one, the primary school two teacher, I don't remember her name, she came all the way from Mo in West Nile, meaning a primary grade 2 teacher from West Nile is posted to Tororo. The reason was that her salary was more than sufficient to cater for her and her family, including possible transportation, should she require to go and visit her relatives in West Nile. Therefore, also given the economic context, per pound, per dollar, per shilling, the wage, the strength of our shilling, and also, if you like, the cost of living and where you link the living wage then to the realities. So then if teachers got those...
Maybe just something small. Maybe just something small. You know that 2001-2000 World Bank Structure Adjustment Programs where there was a conversation on privatizing what government had as a firm grip on the provision of public goods, either through systems like taxation and then the provision of those free services, or using public companies that then they sort of... Do you think the approach of government to prioritize a private-led economy rather than one that is engineered by government, do you find that a much better option where citizens can have a choice to go to a private school rather than a government school, or where the government just provides that essential service?
You're mixing the point. The World Bank position on that was criminal. Museveni's regime's commitment to buy into the IMF and World Bank is criminal. And in any case, the move by Museveni, who claims to be a socialist and a Pan-Africanist, and if he understands the context of Pan-Africanism, a Pan-Africanist cannot be a bulldog for IMF and World Bank and Bretton Woods institutions. A Pan-Africanist, from an ideological perspective, cannot subject an average African child and African future to the whims of Western influence, excess, capitalist exploitation. In any case, those private education in the 60s and 60s and 70s, they were there. In my time, they were there. But that's why I'm trying to say that you choose...
But public schools were even better.
Not even. Public schools are supposed to be better, and they were better. And the people who killed public schools, Museveni and his team, they killed public education. That's my point. So I was saying that when I sat for my primary living exams, I sat for the same exams with every pupil in this country. And so when I went to Miri in my senior one, I sat in the same class with the best people in this country. And that people had come from Nakasero Primary School. Now, somebody would need to be crazy to come from Nagongera, to be living modestly in Nagongera, to sell the entirety of their livelihood in order to take their child to a Seeing Museveni private Uganda Limited school in Gulf Coast Club. It just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, because even public schools, I think at the moment they charge up to $500. Some go up to $600 actually if you put it in its summation. So is it your argument that, let's say, the UPC government post-independence was a bit more socialist and less capitalist?
I don't know what you call a bit. You can't be a bit socialist.
You choose. So were you entirely socialist?
And in any case, actually, this is also not a matter of ideology. I think you may then go ahead and mix it. And if it were a matter of ideology, then you would mix the fact that public services are necessarily at the whims of capitalists. The state in America, the most capitalist state in the world, subsidizes public services, including education. The Musevenis, when they came from the bush, they applied the bush economics, and they had no clue. So they operated like agents. And so agents, they brought to the national disaster that we had. I am saying to you that the two Obote governments, if it's what you're referring to, the UPC government,
sure.
They were progressive left political government. And the government, where the state, took the responsibility of the state. That's what our independence was all about, and the championing of independence to create an emancipation environment for our peoples. That's the role of the state. But the state creates an enabling environment for which, if there is an innovative Rashid, who goes into innovation and technology and creates his business and wants to be like the next Bill Gates, he will have been educated like Ochieno in Agongara Primary School, because
They don't need to go to Washington?
His parents did not necessarily afford, or that was his mandatory privilege to go to Kawempe Public's primary school, secondary school, and from Kawempe do well enough to go to Chambogo Technical Institute, as it was at the time. And so maybe Chambogo University of Science and Technology, as UPC then would design it. So he specializes in innovation and becomes the best engineer, in this case possibly software engineer, and does so better than MIT in the US, and becomes a better engineer than most in NASA in America. And if he does that, and through his innovation, he goes ahead and sets up his private facility in the outskirts of Kampala, not in Namamve Forest to kill the environment, but possibly go somewhere in Nakasongola and gets the space. A sensible government does not matter. The ideological leanings should be able to enable him, possibly even give him subsidies, and possibly create enabling environments for which and subsidies, or perhaps give him a tax break as he sets up his innovation center for Uganda, innovation center for East Africa, innovation center for Africa. That is nothing to do with ideology. But in any case, if part of your question was about private versus public education, throughout my primary education, throughout my secondary education, and up to my university education in this country, there was absolutely no need for an average bright child. I'm going to be a bit cheeky here. An average bright Ugandan child, yeah? There was no need for him or her or their parents to take them to a private school. And I'll tell you.
Because government schools were...
Government schools, I want to insist using the word public schools, government schools were the best. They were there because they're sufficiently catered for. And in any case, Rashid's parents paid taxes. Government schools are publicly funded institutions.
And people should be getting the benefits
and people should be able taxes. To get the benefit of that. And they did. And so then, if you want to play posh, those days, your child was stubborn, you went to Namasagali College.
Yeah, those schools which are now a shadow of their former
No, but Namasagali was a private missionary school, and fully private missionary school. But I'm saying the rest of the other schools which are directly, formally public state, including missionary schools like Mount St. Mary's and Namagunga, they're public schools, but missionary public in the sense that government in 1963 deliberately made sure that all missionary schools were embedded with state schools, that Kibuli SS for Muslim schools, you can do your Muslim jihad and everything else and teach the Quran and pray in Islam. But if Joseph chose that they want to take their daughter to Kibuli, she puts Kibuli first grade for a PLE. She qualifies to go to Kibuli because you just don't do the back
on merit,
door. On merit, you go to Kibuli. You go to Kibuli. Now, Kibuli was obliged to cater for the needs of all the children. That's from 1963. That's what UPC did for this country. And that's what UPC did for our independence. Meaning you create that diversity. And so, likewise, for me, I'm of Catholic background. I went to Bosawa College, Miri, on the instruction of my headmaster, who himself was Catholic, as it were. But his view, it was the best school, and I still believe it's the best school and will be the best school in the future. But I had wanted to go to St. Mary's, Kisubi, where my cousin was. And my mother wanted me to go to St. Peter's in Toro because it was a local nearby school. And my headmaster had a different opinion. I was amongst the best of the country, so I had the grades to go to any other school.
Any school, sure.
But what I'm saying here is, if after the selection, and those selections, they would do selection collectively, after the selection for Senior 1 for the top schools that have been done, if you came to Mwiri and your name is not in the list, you will be known to have come through the back door. And once in a while, those were there. And once in a while, some of those would be circumstantial backdoor. I use a good backdoor. The good backdoor was the children who came from exiles in 1979, and many of them joined us from the liberation war from Tanzania. Henry Keloriem, who is one of them. I recall the head of us. So yeah, so you would go to these public schools and get spaces and join those schools. But what we the students would think of you would say that, well, you jumped the queue, you went through the back door, and honestly, actually, we always felt and believed you were not clever, so you did not meet the bar. So that is the beauty of public education, starting from primary, secondary, and indeed, as I said, up to the highest level.
I think we've had quite an extensive discussion on social services in Obote 1, Obote 2, and what has changed. Maybe to then look at the approach to leadership. How different is the approach to leadership for UPC, Obote 1, Obote 2, and what happened post-1986? What are the crucial contrasts we can construct?
I really don't want to go to that before concluding one small item on context on education, because that thing is very important. Education is the number one equalizer in society. And I cannot accept that as part of my campaigns, globally outside UPC and outside polity, I would seek to let it go, that children of Karamoja and children of Chinoni become expert askaris and their futures are killed in the streets of Kampala because of government policy, and so hence linked to your second question on leadership. But I want to remind you and most of your generation viewers that not only then was primary education free, I mean, as subsidized as it was, but that if you did your primary living exams, obviously granted this over 50 years ago, starting the policy, but it was as recent as 40 years ago, you could go to become a grade 2 teacher, become a nurse, do another technical training, do secretarial work after primary living exams. All the courses that you'd attend would be free, publicly funded, at least in public institutions. Obviously, you can choose the others, but they were there and they're free. But number two, I want to say that my best teacher was merely a grade 2 teacher, Lucy Hagege. So meaning she would have finished primary living exams, PLE, and gone to teacher training school and become such a decent primary school teacher. So quality of education, what is it that has so gradually changed, so much changed, that we now have graduates, some of whom are from some of these dubious universities in the streets of Kampala, people who would struggle to compose a sentence.
And that's true.
And then you take it from primary, the same with secondary. But secondary was this, that after senior 4, education was free. So A-level education was free except for those things to do with uniforms and again some of this parent-teacher related kind of stuff. And then finally university education and all other post-university education was free. Free meaning publicly funded. Now the state managed to fund those things. Now today, those people in charge of our republic normally claim that the population was small. Granted, the population was small. But you guys who do policy work, you know that the population growth has been about 1.6%. And that's sort of amongst the highest in the world, But economic growth goes for 5% plus. Sometimes people boast about 7-8. So Mr. Museveni himself normally likes to talk about how the economy has expanded 30 times. So if that's the case, it's a common sense mathematics that I studied in my primary school. So meaning therefore that, well, the capacity of the state today should be better. But this is the other secret, because I want to conclude this. In 1972, 10 years after independence, since this is the context of the conversation, we were supposed to have universal primary education. Now, you talked about these Scandinavian countries. No, this Republic of Uganda, at independence, had visionary leaders, since you talk about leadership, who had an idea for a country and an idea of how to transform this country and make it a country that belongs to the rest of the world at par. So we were supposed to have universal primary education in 1972, but of course, through the government in 1971. But now in Obote 2, we drew up again a 10-year plan. Universal primary education was supposed to start in 1991. That's why you'll have heard stories of what they used to call in the 80s third world schools. So they opened up primary, secondary schools in every sub-county, at least in my Tororo, certainly in my West Brahma.
In Obote too.
In Obote
Every
too.
sub-county.
Every sub-county had a school, and they were opening and they're being built on as the economy was being revived and revitalized. So that in 10 years, by 1991, education in this country was, as of 1981, supposed to be fully free universally from primary to university. But guess what? The vision of our founding parents for education was, you talked about Scandinavia, tell you about what it is like in Britain. Universally free and compulsory, meaning every child of school age must go to school, up to the age of 16, when you then want to go ahead and maybe go to technical institution depending on your skills. That is how nations build. That's how nations are founded. Those are what our founding parents, who started Uganda National Congress in 1952, thought about it. Our independence at the time was about the emancipation of African peoples in a country that was controlled by the British, white British, politically, but economically predominantly controlled by a minority of Asians.
Minority of Asians. I get you, and I wanted us to, in the second episode, to still pick the contrast.
Sure.
I see you're quite big on issues education and how UPC had a very deliberate policy to ensure education is sorted as a very vital, fundamental public good. In the second episode, I want us to draw parallels between things like corruption, things like militarization of politics, things like political harmony in terms of tolerating political opinions, and how UPC was approaching those specific perspectives.
Thank you for listening to the Policy Digest, a Center for Policy Analysis podcast that explores how African societies are governed and how people and their leaders are shaping the future of their communities. For more podcasts, check out our Podbean and YouTube platforms. Thank you.